Look at what they publish. Look at what they expect us to write. I just want to rub their noses in it.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing American Fiction, which came out in 2003. As usual, there will be spoilers, so if you've not watched the film, go watch it now. I will also be saying the F word. It is a very pivotal part of this plot. So if you're uncomfortable with the word or if you have younger listeners, use your discretion with that. Let's dive in. American Fiction is a story about a moderately successful author who is very frustrated with the expectations that publishers have on him. And in that frustration, he writes a satirical novel. And completely to his surprise, this satirical novel ends up being a huge bestseller, ends up being insanely popular. And he is then forced to contend with what it means to stay true to one's own work, produce work you're proud of, and basically weighing that against like what it means to be a commercial success and what it means to like do things for money and do things that are popular that perhaps go against what you truly believe. The film came out in 2023 to huge critical success, and it's based on a book by Percival Everett called Erasure, which came out in 2003. The film stars Jeffrey Wright, Sterling K. Brown, Tracy Ellis Ross, Lucretia Meyer Taylor, Leslie Uggams, John Ortiz, Issa Rae, and it is written and directed by Cord Jefferson. I didn't know anything about Cord Jefferson. I'd never heard of him before, so I had to do my research, and I saw that they were a writer, producer on shows like The Good Place, Station 11, Master of None. They were a consultant on Succession, but to my huge surprise, I found out that Cord Jefferson was a writer for the show HBO's Watchmen. It's one of my favorite shows. I love it. I really want to do like a comparison of the show and the comic book. So I was really excited and I was really surprised because I really enjoyed that show. The movie was also nominated for Best Film, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Original Score. And, I thought it should have won like so many more categories, especially thought like Sterling K. Brown for Best Supporting Actor and Jeffrey Wright for Best Actor. Like I thought they were such good performers in this film, but they didn't. It did end up winning Best Adapted Screenplay. So I'm really happy that Cord Jefferson got some recognition for this film because I thought it was very well deserving. So right off the bat, going to instant take. It's like hard for me to remember because I saw this film in January and it's just been like a crazy few months, and I've actually had this essay in the works for like several months at this point. So it's hard to remember my initial take because I have seen this film 5 times, maybe even 6, but definitely 5. But I loved it. Like I walked out of the theater and I texted everybody I knew and I was like, you have got to see this film. This is like a perfect film. And I felt so weird saying like, this is a perfect film because they call My Pathology a perfect book in the movie. But truly, I thought it was like such a well-made film. And I didn't think it would get nominated. Like literally the thing that I told everybody was, you've got to go see American Fiction. It's so good. It's not going to get nominated for anything, but like you should still make the time to go see it. And then I got nominated and I had to like contend with like, oh wow, the Oscars and the Academy Awards are like recognizing films that I personally think to get recognized. And this is like the 3rd year that's happened in a row where something that I didn't think would get nominated got nominated. So I guess maybe the Academy Award is doing a better job, or I have to like recognize that I still have a very dated idea of the Academy. I don't know. Either way, I loved it. Like I truly loved it. The second I saw it, I was like, I have got to analyze this film. One of the reasons that I absolutely loved this film was that I thought it was asking a very interesting question, which was like, it wasn't asking, are we advocating for diversity? It was asking us to reflect on the fact, or reflect on how well we are like promoting diversity and advocating for like representation, specifically in the media, specifically in the publishing industry, but I think this can also go for like the publishing and film television industries as well. I remember like back in, I think it was end of 2021, I wrote this essay that kind of reflected on this exact question. And it was like, are we doing it well? So like, if you're in America around 2020, like, we had like a huge reckoning with like, wow, we have got to like do better. And, a lot of that was like a huge push that really started in the summer of 2020. And it felt like a lot of companies, it felt like a lot of people were starting to understand and implement that. And I remember in like 2021, it just kind of felt like those efforts stopped. And, I was really personally frustrated because I was like so excited to see like these conversations happening and to see companies like take an interest in wanting to like do better. And then it just felt like everybody was like, the conversation stopped. It felt like the effort stopped. It didn't really stop. Like I think companies were still doing things, but like I was still really disappointed that we weren't pushing it further. So to like give an example, I didn't end up publishing the essay because I was working for an entertainment company at the time. And I was like this, I can't jeopardize my position with this company by saying all this, but, it just felt like everything that was coming out around that time, like their version of diversity was you would have a character that was a person of color, but I felt like the casting was like their race had absolutely no bearing on the way that they saw the world. Like it just, they were just a person of color. And I imagined the casting agent being like, okay, I would see someone who's Black, Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, like doesn't matter, just a non-white person. And it just felt like the production companies and the entertainment companies were just like, see, we're giving you diversity. Like you should be happy. Like, we're giving you people of color on screen, but those roles were just like, it just felt like it felt like a diversity check. It just felt like literally something on their to-do list, like put this many people of color on the screen, check, we did it. The flip side was that we were getting like some stories that were just super like interesting. And, they were greenlighting like a lot more films and television shows that really had to do with race. But it just felt like those were also like really, really heavy parts of race. Like it was just kind of like a super emotional, like stories or just heavy things. And I remember being so frustrated because I was like, I just want a story about a person of color in which, yes, their world is like their worldview, the way they navigate the world, the way they're treated is affected by their race. Like you can't separate it out, but their race isn't also the main problem. Like their race isn't the core issue and everything is based on their race. And I was so happy to get this film because this was what I've been wanting. Like I've been wanting a film like where we have someone who's not white as the main person, but like, and it's funny because his race plays into it, but you also see all these other things that are happening in his life that don't really have to do with his race at all. And this is just what I've been wanting. And I personally like love this film because I think it's asking the same question that I was asking, which was like, how well are we doing this? Are we doing it correctly? Is the way we are doing it helping or hurting? Like, what are the effects of these actions that we have now had in place for a little while at this point? And I love that the film doesn't land on an answer. Like it's so refreshing to me because it's not saying like you should do this or you should do this. It doesn't land on any kind of answer. It's just asking us to reflect. It's asking us to think. It's asking us to look back at ourselves and say like, what do you think? Like where do you stand in this? Where like, how do you feel about this? And like from your take, like, do you feel like things are going well or we're doing a good job, or as creators or consumers of these arts that we are like participating in a way that like sits well with us and, are participating in like, if we actually look at things holistically, like, are we participating in a way that's like beneficial and not harmful? It was such great questions that was asked. And there's also like the whole other aspect of like, and this is I get this is such a niche take, but there's also the whole aspect of like asking us as creators, like, where do you stand in this? Like, you know, we all have, maybe not we all, but a lot of us are creators, and like a lot of us put things out in the world, like whether that is in a traditional form of art or not. We put things out, and we really like, it's asking us to like reflect on our own work and say, like, as a creator, do you know, like, how much are you staying true to your own beliefs and your own moral values and your own value systems, and how much are you sacrificing for the sake of being accepted, or the sake of like money, or the sake of like popularity? And it was just, yeah, it was a very interesting question the film asked. I also love that like there were so many times that this film like had characters that just felt really over the top, and it was, like I do remember like the first time I was watching this, like we're laughing, like it was, there's Black people in the theater, there's white people in the theater, there's people who are, different ethnicities, and everybody's laughing. Like, it's, the movie is a satire and everybody gets it. But the movie also gave us so many opportunities, whether it was like a character or a situation or a line, in which viewers had an opportunity to see themselves and to say like, oh, I do that, or I behave in this way, or I say this, or I perhaps think that. And that's why I felt like it was a movie that really resonated, because it gave us like a spectrum of experiences to look at and be like, oh, I do that. Like I act like, no, I'm not like this and I don't behave this way in general, but like I have thought that, or I probably have said that. Yeah, it was, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, it's not asking us to say, it's not coming to any answer. It's not saying like, is the representation good? Is it bad? It's just saying like, reflect on what's been going on, reflect on the way you participate in these infrastructures and in these systems, and ask yourself, like, is what you're doing good or bad? Yeah, it was brilliant. As I mentioned, American Fiction was an adaptation of the book Erasure by Percival Everett. The book talks about the publishing industry in the late 90s, and I thought this was such an interesting thing because it's reflecting on the publishing industry of our time, and this movie decides to reflect on the publishing industry of our time. And it goes back to the point of me saying, like, it's not asking, like, do we have representation? It's asking, like, no, we have it. Like, we have a lot of things to promote representation, but, like, are they actually as effective as we are thinking? Or, are we doing it well? So the book, I thought it was a very interesting parallel, and I appreciate that like Cord Jefferson chose not to have the same take on the publishing industry that I think the book was taking. You really get to see the skills of Everett as a writer, in the same way that I think this film showcases like this like Monk's skills as a writer. You really, like, Everett just put so many different style choices in the novel, so you really get to see his like how good of a writer he is. But like the most interesting thing is that he publishes My Pathology in its entirety in Erasure. And it just feels like it's asking like the same question. Like it's giving you My Pathology, and it's giving you the book that publishers want. And it's saying like, is this what you want? Like, is this the kind of book you want? And it's showcasing this book within like the larger narrative of his actual writing. So again, a reader can sit and compare like My Pathology to what like Everett's actual writing as Erasure is, and say like, yeah, what book do I want? It's so brilliant and so well done. And yeah, I thought it was a great concept. And I love that, I do love the way it's adapted into the film, but the book itself just sounds absolutely amazing. And now for the film. There were so many layers to this. Like I honestly, like, literally, I think I watched this film like end of January, and I spent like weeks just trying to like think of how to talk about this film, how to break it down, because it's so complex. Like, it's such a good film, but there are so many ways to come at it. And I finally decided to approach this like linearly, just because this is this is a meta narrative. And if you don't know what a meta narrative is, if you don't know what a meta narrative is, it's kind of like a contained story within a larger story. And so as we go through the story, we're kind of pulling back through the layers. So I felt like it just made the most sense to go through this film like linearly and to talk about things as we go, because as we continue to go, we'll be pulled out further and, you see things differently. That made the most sense. So after this huge intro, we are finally going to jump into the actual story. Let's begin. Okay. So Monk begins his story by saying, okay, let's begin. And I love that because it fits in this idea that he's telling this story to Wiley, but it also fits in to him just starting a class, which is what we start with. It's a class on literature in the American South, and he writes the N-word on the board, and the girl is like, I'm uncomfortable with this word. And this is such a great scene because honestly, like within, he gets into a fight with this student, kicks her out of class, she complains about him, he ends up getting put on academic leave. Within the first few minutes of this film, we get basically two of the major central conflicts of this entire film, which is brilliant. Like, I can't remember the last time I saw a movie where within the first few minutes we get the core ideas of the film, and this is it. But I want to talk about the interaction he has with the student, because first of all, it's funny. It's funny to us, but it's also not shocking because we have now gotten to this place where everyone's extremely conscious of the words they use, and everyone tries to be politically correct, and it came out at the exact right time for us to be able to laugh at her comment, but then to also take it completely seriously and not see it as absurd that okay, she's offended by this. And I love the line that Monk says where he's like, well, I got over it. I think you can too. And it's a brilliant line because it's it's true. This girl has absolutely no true understanding of the bearing or the weight that that word has, and she never will understand. And Monk is the person who's more affected, but Monk is not bothered because it's also a class on the American South, literature in the American South, and I've taken that class. That word comes up, but you also have to understand the historical contents and also understand that these things are not okay now. But no, I love that interaction because Monk's saying I got over it, you can too. It shows us that, first of all, I think Monk is completely not buying and doesn't understand why she's uncomfortable, and rightfully so, but he's not in tune with the world, but he's also not in tune with people. He's not really in tune with what's happening in the world in the sense that he doesn't seem to have any understanding that maybe someone could be uncomfortable seeing that word, but he's also not in tune with people in the sense that he's I am not going to budge or change anything about me or anything that I'm doing in order to make you comfortable, in order to make you feel better. He's just this is who I am. This is where I am. You have to meet me where I am. I am not going to budge and meet you halfway. And it was, I thought that was a really great way of showing one conflict, which is Monk is someone who has these very set ideas about the world and people and who he is and the role in it. And he's not going to budge on it at all. And I think the second interesting thing, what I absolutely love, it's whose opinion matters. And it's the core idea of the whole book, whose opinion matters. And so he's arguing with this student, and at the end of the day, it's does her opinion matter as a white person who, is a white person, as a student, as a person who's there to learn, as a person who probably, will never understand with the true weight and the historical context and the hatred and the everything that gets put into that word, like, is her opinion matter, or does Monk's opinion matter as a Black man, as a teacher, as a professor, as someone who's there to impart knowledge? Like, there's so many different roles that they both are playing. It's not just about Black and white, and it's really asking us the question, like, whose opinion matters? And again, we don't get an answer because he kicks her out. She's clearly upset enough to like go complain about him, and he gets put on leave. Yeah. And I thought it was so interesting that we get everything, like every line is meant to tell us something in this screenplay. And that's why I just love it. But we get another line where he's meeting with the dean of the college, and the dean is like, or he says something like, you asked a German student if his parents were Nazis. And it goes to show us, like, Monk has these ideas of people, like, he's so afraid of being put in a box, but like he himself is putting other people in a box based on like a single description or two of them. And it's kind of like what he is so afraid people doing of him as a Black man is also what he's projecting out to people. And again, this is literally like the first like several minutes of the screenplay, and we get this much information, and we get all of these like themes set up for us that are just going to continue throughout the film, and it is so well done. So from here, he gets put on academic leave. He is told to go to Boston, where he has a book event. It was funny, his book event was like very sparsely attended, and I've been to book events, and yeah, like it was funny, and it also kind of felt on point, but he felt his event is very sparsely attended because it's at the same time as Sintara Golden, and we get Sintara Golden. I really like Sintara's character. She is surprising. Like, I love Issa Rae. I think she's such a great actress, and she's very fun to watch. And yeah, like the fact that she's just a really well cast character. I was very happy to see her. I thought she did a good job, but she also like surprisingly wasn't, to me, a standout character, because everybody was so good in this film that like her and how good she is was still like outshined by the rest of the cast. All that's to say, like I really liked Sintara's character. I kept wondering if Sintara was supposed to be an anagram for Sinatra, and I kept questioning that mostly because my document kept changing it to Sinatra. So I finally just did a little bit of a deep dive into who, like, what Sinatra did. And I know who Sinatra is, but like what he did for the civil rights movements and stuff. And I found a little bit of stuff. Like, I think he was like very much an advocate for, like, of course, having, his musicians be let into clubs to play, but also other musicians that were Black who weren't allowed to play at white only clubs, like advocating for them to come and have the same opportunity. I know he played a benefit concert for Martin Luther King Jr. And it was interesting because it's interesting because I think he was a person who had a lot of privilege and had a lot of power, and did use that power to some extent to like open the door for others. And I get the sense that Sintara Golden is like that, and she is. Like, she does that both with her book and in her advocacy for taking the literary awards a bit seriously. She's like very interested in opening the door for other people and other writers. So maybe it was meant to be an anagram, maybe it's not, I don't know. But I found that very interesting. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was the color scheme of this film. I don't know if everybody got this, but there's a very distinct color scheme to this film. And my take on it, I have to say this is a completely subjective take. The people that I have talked about like the film with, they didn't notice the color scheme. I've not talked to too many people who have. So I would love to hear any other takes that people have, but this is completely my take on what the color schemes are. The two most prominent scheme colors that we see in the film are blue and a pale yellow. Every time, like that's in almost every single shot, whether it's like the background, the backdrop, the things in the room, the clothes they're wearing, like it's always there. And whenever those two colors are not there, it's like a very distinct and important scene. And it's usually red or black that shows up. So we either usually getting a blue or yellow or red or black. To me, blue and yellow represents situations and scenes in which the characters are going along with what is expected of them. Whatever their role is in that moment or in that situation, they're going along with it and they are abiding by it, and they're doing it. To me, red and black, which again, like red and black doesn't show up a lot in this film. So when it does, it really kind of stands out because it's a very like, you know, like very calming colors. So when red and black shows up, it really stands out. To me, red and black represents when a character is staying more true to who they are, but defying an expectation of them, or they're going against something. But it's in direct contrast to like the situation. The last color I do want to mention is green. And again, like green mostly shows up in what people are wearing. And to me, when a character is wearing green, it's when they are like just wholly and completely themselves. And they are just like exactly who they are. And they are at peace with that. So I mentioned this because when we first see Centaura Golden, she is wearing this very beautiful dress that is blue, yellow, red, and black. And you know, again, I've seen this film so many times. Like I didn't think about this the first time, but I did pick it up on subsequent watches. But to me, like it's representing the fact that Centaura Golden, like she does what is wanted of her as a Black author. Like she plays into the role that people think of her and expect of her, but she's also doing what she wants. Like she's telling a story that she wants in a way she wants while still giving people what she wants. And that's why we get the blue and yellow, which again represents like doing what is expected of you, and the red and black, which is kind of going against what people expect of you and doing more what you want. And we get all the colors on her. It was brilliant. Like it was just so brilliant. And, you know, I love fashion. So I'm always like paying attention to details. I'm always paying attention to like the stories that are being told through the clothes or the costumes. And it was just well done. But we see her, you know, when we meet her, she's being interviewed for her book, We Live in the Ghetto. And I'm sorry, not to laugh at that. I just laugh at the way the British interviewer always says it. Like every time I say it, I can't say like "we live in the ghetto." I have to say "we live in the ghetto" because it was just so funny coming out of her mouth. So I'm sorry, I might say that a lot. But yeah, she, you know, we get an excerpt reading and Monk is just shocked. He's just like, what? Like this is what everybody's applauding. Like, are you serious? It was so brilliant because like when she's finished her reading and everybody's applauding, we see Monk with his like, what the heck, like really moment. And then he's immediately blocked by a white woman who stands up, completely blocking his view. And then everybody else stands up. And it's literally Erasure. Like it's literally like whose opinion matters? Like Monk is standing there not applauding her. Like Monk is like, what are you doing? But there's a whole room of people who, they are people of color in there, but it is also predominantly white who are just like in love with this idea, in love with this book. And we don't know whose opinion matters. I thought the blocking in this film was really good, and I don't think blocking is really hard to get, but you can watch this film on mute and like understand a lot of what's going on just by blocking. And that was just a great blocking scene to me. I liked it. So from here, we get to Monk meeting up with Lisa, his sister, played by Tracy Ellis Ross, and they go to dinner with his mom, Agnes, played by Leslie Uggams, and we get to meet Lorraine, who's played by Lucretia Meyer Taylor, and I love all those characters. I love all these scenes. I thought everybody in this cast was really great, but I especially love his like family, and I love these three women. The second thing that came to my mind, so, he meets up with Lisa, they go pick up their mom, and they all go out to dinner. I love this scene because the second thing that I realized that they're doing with this film is defying our own expectations of something. So in the scene, like the first thing that Agnes says to Monk is, you're fat, like, are you depressed? Like, you tend to eat when you're sad. And he's like, no, I'm fine. Like, he brushes it off, but she doesn't let it go. Like, she keeps asking him. She's like, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? Like, are you depressed? Like, talk to me. And I love this because, I don't think we think of like the boomer and the post-war, like Gen X, like generations as caring about mental health. But like this person's husband died by suicide. So like, of course she would care. Like, of course she would take this seriously. Of course she would want to look out for her children and make sure they're okay. And that was one thing that like just stuck out to me, that like, oh, we don't really ever get to see, or like, especially younger generations are like, oh, like the older people don't care about mental health. But it's like, no, like she would. Like, this is a real human who would care. And the second thing we get in this scene is Lisa tells Monk, she's like, I caught Dad kissing a white woman in a car. And his first reaction is, how white? Brahmi white or Southie white? And it's like Monk has these ideas of people, and he's asking this question so he can like fill out his expectations, or fill out like not the prejudices, but like the preconceived ideas that he has of this person. And it's such like, we get so many little bits of Monk in which we're like, oh, you judge people a lot. Like, you judge people and you hold people to a high standard. And you have your preconceived ideas of people. So from here, we go to the bookstore. And I love this scene at the bookstore. So, Monk asks, like, where's Ellis? What's his name? Thelonious Ellison. He's like, where's this person's book? And he finds out that his book is in the Black author section, and he moves the book. And it was such a little scene. And again, like, first watch, you're laughing at it, but subsequent watches, I realized like I forgot to mention the phone call that he has with his agent. So pausing for a second to talk about Monk's book. His book is currently out on submission. And, before he's going to the book event, he gets a call from his agent who tells him that his book has now been denied by the 9th publisher. So they're not interested. They don't want to publish this because they want a Black book by him. And he's like, well, what's a Black book? Like, I'm a Black author. This is a Black book. And then we get this scene at the bookstore in which he finds out that his books are being put in the Black author section and not the fantasy section. It was such a succinct way for us to draw a line through the entire publishing industry. So, you write a book, most people they have to work on getting an agent. But if you have an agent, the agent will put the book on submission. The publisher publishes the book. And then, you're working with the publisher on final edits, final version. You're getting the art together, getting the cover together, getting like final copies of the book. You are working on the marketing, working on promotion, working on book events, and the book hits the shelves. That is the entire publishing process. So we have just seen earlier when he's talking to his agent, and his agent is just like, they're not interested, they deny it. And then we see it on its shelf, and it's not even on the right shelf. And I'm like, this is such a succinct way to say that he's like failing on every level. Like, he can't get people to look the book, to like read his book and be interested and buy the book to publish it. And he can't get people to buy the book in the shelf. And also, to me, it really showed like why he's a failure as an author. And okay, so when I saw this, I was like, this makes complete sense, because if I was going to look for a fantasy book, where do I go? I go to the fantasy section. And if I was looking for a book on an author, specifically a Black author, and they had a Black author section, yeah, I would go to the Black author section to read a biographical or autobiographical book about someone's life or experience as a Black person. But if I was just looking for fantasy, I would not think to go to a Black author section. Like, I would go to like fantasy. And I would assume that if you want to showcase an author and Black authors, yeah, their book might be there, but it would also be in fantasy. So I thought it was so interesting that like we get why he's like a failure. He's not a failure, but like he's misunderstood on like every level of the publishing process, including where his books land up. Poor Monk, like poor Monk. I don't know what else to say other than like he is not being set up for success, and you really feel bad for him at this point because he is just failing all around and it's not even his fault. Like he's just trying to be a writer who writes. So from the bookstore, we then get Monk and Lisa having a drink and talking about how to take care of Agnes and what to do with her. And I just love that Lisa, like being the only sibling who lives in the same city, has been taking care of her mom, but she doesn't like accept it. She's not like, she pushes back on Monk and she's like, this is your responsibility as much as it is mine. Like, it's not my responsibility. It's not my sole decision what we do with our mom. Like, you have to have as much interest and you have to like help me out. And I love that she demands that. But the scene ends with Lisa dying. And I was truly sad because honestly, like within the few minutes we get her, I was like, I love Tracy Ellis Ross. She's so good. Like I love this character. And then she dies. It was very sad, but I loved her eulogy, or her letter to her family read at her funeral. It was hilarious and funny. And, it just further captured this like really vibrant character that she was. We get Phil narking on them. And again, we take another example of like a Black experience. And, when we say this, we think so much of like a Karen just calling the cops on a Black family who's like just cooking or picnicking or chilling or something. And I love that we get this dynamic of a white person narking on a Black family, but it's not what we think. Like, we get to meet Phil and we're just like, oh, like Phil's just kind of like the super annoying neighbor who like makes sure that everyone's following HOA rules and like complains on anybody regardless of their race. And the best part is that they're like, shut up, Phil, like shut up and get out of here, Phil. And we find out that they're all like friends, or they all know each other. They've known each other for a long time and they know that this is Phil's personality and they're just like, shut up, like get out of here, like move it on. And I like, it was so cool to see what we think is a Black experience of like getting the cops called on you and as just this kind of situation that it's like, no, it doesn't have to do with race. Like Phil would say this if this was a white family pouring cremated ashes into the ocean. Yeah, it was cool. It again takes like all these little experiences and it's like, it's not that it's not always what you think, but it's just like, they're not always played out this way, or these situations don't always come up in this way, or it's not always about race. And yeah, it was a great scene. We get to meet Cliff from here. Oh my gosh, like I just love Sterling K. Brown. Like he's so good. He's such a powerful actor, and like he just takes so much. Like he really inhabits his character in such a great way, and he takes the weight of like being someone who's been closeted perhaps their whole life, and the weight of like the family dynamics and the expectations on him as a son and a brother and as a husband and as a father, and just like he inhabits it so deeply and it comes out in his acting and it's just so powerful and so good. Both him, every single person, I keep talking about all of them, but and even Jeffrey Wright like just inhabits Monk in such a natural way that like even scenes where he's not really doing anything or not really talking, like the way he's just like living as Monk, I'm like, you both are so good. So I loved it. I love Cliff's character. And in this scene we really get like a sense of how, just more of a sense of their father, and he's cropped up in conversation with Lisa as well. We get a sense that like Monk is a lot like their father in the sense that he's just distant and, like I said, like Monk is like, this is who I am. I'm not going to budge for you. I'm not going to adapt for you. I'm not going to like accommodate you. You have to meet me where I am. And I just really get the sense like this is like the connection we see with their father, is that he also is very much like this. After the funeral scene, we get to meet Coraline, who is played by Erica Alexander, just another great actress. And And when we meet her, she's wearing an outfit that is a blue and yellow top, like it's a yellow top with like a blue cover thing on it, and then green shorts. And I love it because it's kind of just really emblematic of where she is in her life, which is like she's come to the understanding that she doesn't want to be with her partner anymore, but she's still trying to figure out like what that looks like, and still navigating that and the expectations of her. So it just fit really well with where she is in her life. And I love the way the color scheme shows up in the film, and I love that it's always subjective to the character and what their situation is as well. But yeah, like she's talking to Monk, and she likens being a lawyer to being a writer, and says like, you can't get caught up in the good or bad of a person or of a situation or of a character, because like, oh, I just love that she's like, they're all guilty, but like people are so much more than just their like bad act. And it's so true. It's just like, you can't get hung up on like the judgments that you have. You really have to like take a step back and realize like people are so much more than that. I also really love that like when she was talking about being a lawyer, I immediately thought of Lisa. And I was trying to understand the connection. Lisa is a OBGYN doctor. I was trying to understand the connection, and I was like, maybe they were trying to put both of these women in a public serving position. But then I was like, no, like they really drove home the fact that Lisa's job is politicized, and like it should not be, but they drive home the fact that like what she's seen as doing, which is like giving people care and probably providing abortions, is wrong in some people's eyes. And with Lisa, or with Coraline, like they definitely bring up the fact that people don't like that she defends guilty people. And it's just, I thought it was so brilliant, because it just goes exactly to like what she's saying, which is like, whose opinion matters? Like, whose opinion matters? Like, Lisa's helping so many people, and she's pissing off people to the point that you need to go through like a metal detector to go to work every day, and she says that. But like, she's helping people, and Coraline is helping people too, and she's doing it probably at the expense of families who were hurt by this person, but she's helping people, and like, whose opinion matters? It's just such like subtle ways that these themes are just woven into the story, and we see it in so many different ways. It was very brilliant. But from here we end up, Monk takes his mom to the doctor, and we find out that she does have like the early signs of dementia or amnesia. I'm actually not sure. I guess dementia maybe. I don't remember what they said it was. And this is like, everything is bubbling up. They say that she will need care. She does need help. This likely will get worse. And he's reading like an article about we live in the ghetto in the waiting room. So like all the tension is bubbling up at this point. And this is where we get the turning point of the story. Monk writes, "My pathology." I know what my pathology means, but I wanted to look it up because like I didn't totally understand it in the context of like the way it's the title of the book. So the definition of my pathology is study of diseases, something abnormal, deviations of a normal state, or deviation giving rise to social ills. That's the definition that I think is like what's being used in the term my pathology. And it's so interesting because like, I don't think people walk around saying, like, it's used in a very academic setting, and it's used with like distance, and it's used with like observation and time and separation from the subject matter, and like also like research and knowledge. Nobody's really, at least I don't think people are really walking around being like, well, my pathology is this, and this is why I'm this way. And so it was so interesting that this is the title of the book, because it was telling us two things. First of all, like when Monk is saying my pathology, like he's kind of saying, I am the expert on this subject matter. So like when you say that you're the expert, people are going to take you as the expert. Like they're taking him as someone who has like done thought or reflection on their life as this character. And like they're taking him at his word. But the second thing that I think really lends to like the definition as well is like he's saying, this is why I messed up. This is why I am the way I am. And I think a lot of audiences are like, oh yes, like tell us why you're messed up. Like tell us why you are the way you are and why you like have these issues and blah, blah, blah. So to me, it really worked both ways. Like there's so many ways to interpret like the title, My Pathology. And I keep saying I love things, but like the acting out of the story as he's typing it was so brilliant because, you know, there's so many ways that we can get a story within a story. And like, you know, a perfect example is when we get the story of the Deathly Hallows in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Like it was such an anticipated scene and they chose to portray it by taking you into the storybook and like you're seeing an animation of the storybook. And so the same way, like the fact that they chose this, like instead of us just reading over Monk's shoulder what he's typing, the fact that they chose to act it out, not even like taking us to a setting, but keeping the setting in the office and acting it out right there was so intentional. And like, again, when I saw this in theaters, like when he's just throwing in these like tropes that we have of like what the Black experience is like everybody's laughing. Like again, everybody's laughing. But I will say that it took until the fourth watch of this film for me to be like, but their acting is good. And this is actually a very compelling situation. And I've got to explain because, like, again, they could have played this so many different ways. They could have made it a joke. They could have made it funny. They could have made it over the top, but they chose to actually portray this as if we were watching a play of these two characters. And when Van Gogh is delivering his monologue, like taking out the entire context of the film and literally just focusing on the monologue, I was like, this is beautiful writing. Like, this is a good monologue for a man who is in this situation, who has just had these realizations and, you know, is needing to like escape. Like, it's a good monologue. And again, they perform it straight. They perform it real. And it was in that moment that I, you know, the whole time I'm just like on Monk's side and I get Monk's perspective. And this, seeing Van Gogh perform that monologue, I was like, oh, I get the white publisher's perspective. Like, if someone handed me this dialogue and said, this is real, this is like, not even if this is real, but like, this is a story of a character, I would read that and be like, wow, this is good. Like, this is good writing. And that's what's funny is that Monk is a good writer. And like, they talk a lot about how My Pathology is not written well, but I really just think they mean like it's written in spoken English and this probably doesn't have like the most narration or like, you know, setting narrative, but like just based on this scene, you can tell that Monk is a good writer and My Pathology is actually probably well written and there are compelling characters and moving speeches by these characters. So it was an instant where the movie just made me think. And again, like the first 3 times I saw this film, I was laughing. First 3 times it was like, oh, this is so funny. And I think it was just finally the 4th time I was like, oh, like this is really serious and they're playing it straight and it's kind of good. Like again, like just as this character as Van Gogh, to have this like realization is deep and impactful as a viewer if you actually stop to listen to what he's saying. And yeah, and you know, it goes back to what I was saying, like the movie gives us a lot of opportunities to see ourselves in so many different characters, in so many instances, and be like, do I do that? Or do I feel this way? Or do I act this way? It really isn't so black and white, pun intended. Another thing that I love is when Keith's Keith David's character gets shot and he just turns to Monk and he was like, what was that for? And Monk is just like, I don't know. Because it reminded me of what Coraline says when she's like, it reminds me of like what they say about writing, which is like, you have to kill your darlings. And writers do that all the time. Like, you cannot keep a character around because you love it. Although we have seen authors do that. But it's like, you've got to kind of kill your character. It's what's needed for the plot. And it reminded me of like the way lawyers also have to like have this sense of removal from their work. And I am saying this as both a writer and a lawyer. I have worked in like, I've done like a public facing or like a, I forget what you would call it, but like basically I've worked in like a similar position where you're just kind of like doing more like work. I've worked in a public facing position or role as a lawyer. And I felt that, like you're just getting these like cases coming to you and you can't get emotionally bogged down. You can't get like caught up in it. You kind of just like, I have to get this done. I have to like push this forward. I have to do this. I have to do this. Because if you actually stop and think about each case and get emotionally wrapped up in the case, like it can weigh on you so much. So this isn't really exactly what Coraline said, but I'm like, yeah, like again, I completely know like the ways that these two jobs are very similar. And this is just another one that you just have to be kind of removed from what you're doing and get things done. So Monk sends us off to his agent, Arthur. And I love Arthur. I love, first of all, like so many things I want to talk about Arthur. So I'm going to try and talk about them all. We've seen a little bit of Arthur, but this is where we really start to get off more of Arthur when Monk sends the book to him. I love that he's Puerto Rican. Like, I love that it's funny if you think about it, if you really think on like, that he's not white, but he's not black, but he can kind of see both. Like he's not white, so he does get a lot of racial stuff that Monk is talking about, but he's also not in Monk's shoes. So he probably doesn't feel like as burdened by it as Monk does, because he probably doesn't he doesn't like get that stuff to the extent Monk might. So he can understand Monk. He gets where he's coming from, but he's also just not as like jaded or angry as Monk is. And he's also not white, but he gets where the white audience is. And he is always, this is the role of an agent. And I love, really an agent facilitates like selling a book to a publisher. But I love that like along with the act of selling the book to the publisher, there's a whole other like added element of it in which he's trying to help Monk understand like, you got to give a little, you got to do a little in order to be like commercially successful. And I love that he really straddles this role as a person who's neither not white, not black. And it's also like, it goes beyond just his role of an agent, which is like kind of not just brokering a deal, but like he's going beyond that. Like he really is trying to help Monk be like, you got to like just give a little to be successful. He's a very interesting character. I also do want to talk about his clothing, because I think when we first see him, he's wearing a lot of grays. And then as like the movie progresses, he wears a lot more blue suits. And another thing I want to say about his office is he's got this like picture of, it's not faceless white men, but they're like, you can't see their face, but like they're all just kind of like walking. It's like a sea of white men in suits walking. And the first few scenes that we're seeing Arthur, he's just at his desk taking calls. So it's kind of like an upward shot of him and the pictures behind him. And it's just like a visual manifestation of like who Arthur is catering to at the end of the day. Like, Monk is his client. Monk is who he's working for. His success, the money he gets is really contingent on Monk's success, the Monk money gets. but he knows his audience. Like he has that, like, and it's specifically, it could have just been white people, but it's white men in business suits, like middle-aged, a little bit older white men in business suits. And like, it's just like an awareness of like the audience that he knows is always looking over his shoulder, that he always has to play into and cater to because of the world that he lives in. So I thought that was great. Another thing I love is that his office is all red and black. Like it's kind of like black chairs and red walls, and but we see yellow and blue books everywhere. And it just kind of like sunk into the color theme for me even more, that this man is who he is, but like he will play into what he needs to play as an agent to be successful in this publishing industry. Yeah, it is great. The conversation that they have is just so, I really want to unpack it because it was such a great conversation. But Arthur calls him and he's just like, what is this? Like, he says, this book scares me. And I didn't quite get like why the book scared him. And, I had to think about this a lot. And I was like, well, the book scares him because he knows what Monk is going through. Like, he sees Monk as a whole person. So he knows that Monk has been let go from his job. He's just lost his sister. He's taking care of his mom. His mom has things going on. He's not working, so he's not making money. And then he writes this book. And the book is like scary. And the book is something that, if it was taken as the satire it was, it could have blown up his relationship and Arthur's relationship with a lot of people in the publishing industry. Because he read it as like the FU to the publishing industry that Monk intended it to be. And to him, it's also like dark because of everything that Monk is going through. Like it's just like, it's so unlike his writing, but yeah, I think it's just, he knows who Monk is and he knows what his writing is. And this is so different, but he can feel the anger and the hatred that's in it, that he's just like, this scares me. Arthur says, basically Monk is like, I don't care, send it out. Arthur's like, I will. And then Arthur's like, people think they want the truth, but they don't. They just want to feel absolved. It's such a brilliant line. So at first when I read this, I thought when he said people think they want the truth, I thought he was saying that people think they want the truth about what Black lives are, and they don't. They just want to feel absolved. Is like, they don't actually want a look into it. They just want to they just want absolution. Like they just want to feel like they can look into it. But as I unpacked this more, I was like, no, that's not really what he's saying. When he's saying they think they want the truth, I actually think he's saying that white people want the truth of how they have been uplifting Black or underrepresented voices. Like they want the truth of the ways that they have probably been failing at representation and failing to do things. And then he's like, they don't, they just want absolution. And the absolution comes with playing into, they just want to feel absolved. So they just want to feel like their guilt is lessened by giving someone an opportunity that they didn't feel like they had. And it was so impactful. It's a very impactful way of saying it, that maybe it could be read both ways. Maybe he's saying people think they want the truth about Black lives, but they don't. They just want to feel absolved by having a view. Or it could be read as people think they want the truth about the ways that they have not been doing representation well, but they don't. They just want to feel absolved. They just want to give you a way to lift up an underrepresented voice. And I love that Monk is fortunate for me, that's not my problem. And he's right. I don't have an argument for which that is his problem, because I don't think that's his problem. But it goes back to this question, as a creator, where does he draw the line? It's not his problem, but I guess if he wants to sell books, it's his problem. I don't know, but I also agree, yeah, it's not his problem. From here, the next biggest thing that happens is he gets a book offer from Thomson Watt for, I think it was $700,000 which is like insane for like a book thing. Again, like I'm a lawyer and I do work with a lot of publishing contracts and I work with authors. And so like, yeah, I can tell you that's a lot. Like that's a huge amount for a book. And like I want to stop for a sec and talk about Thompson Watt, because like I don't know if how explicitly the movie said this, but like I want to say my interpretation of the film is that the movie was not pointing to a publishing house like Thompson Watt and saying this is the publishing industry. The movie was taking Thompson Watt as a very, very specific type of publishing house within the publishing industry. And this publishing house is probably run by predominantly white people. Their audience are predominantly white, middle class, or affluent, you know, but I think it's a very important distinction to make, because like I don't think it was meant to represent the publishing industry as a whole. It was again meant to like hone in on one particular type of publishing house and comment on that, or really just like give us insight into that. Monk doesn't want, like Monk is like, why? Like this was a joke, like why? And Arthur's like, this is the most lucrative joke you get. And then we get the brilliant Johnny Walker analogy in which, you know, we get Johnny Walker Red, Johnny Walker Black, Johnny Walker Blue. And, you know, Arthur says like, Johnny Walker Blue, you will always be Johnny Walker Blue. You will always be this good writer who is quality, but sometimes you have to sell books that are cheaper and less nice, like the Johnny Walker Red and Johnny Walker Black, in order to like sell books and be successful in this industry. Like it confirmed to me that there's a distinct color theme in this film. And I've watched this film 5 times, maybe more, and I've thought about it for months, and I still cannot fit those two color themes, because again, to me, like blue was like you're going against what is expected of you. But in this analogy, he's saying you are a blue author, like you can write good stuff. And to me, red and black was like when you're rebelling against. So red and black is like, no, you should write this book. So maybe it's him. Yeah, maybe it does fit. It probably does fit. I've thought about this for so much and it might finally fit, but he like, oh no, does it? Like Monk is going against who he is and doesn't want to do this. So he is already in the red and black in order to publish this book. I don't know. I need people to like explain this. Like if this is clear to you, if you have a different take on the color theme in which the Johnny Walker analogy works, like please tell me, because this is like bothering me. I will figure it out. Maybe in like a year, there'll be a follow-up in which I figured it out. But it was brilliant. It was a good analogy. And it did confirm to me that there is a distinct color scheme to this film. So they get on the phone with Paula Baderman, and like Paula Baderman is a stand-in for just the way that Thompson Watt is a stand-in for a very specific subsect of the publishing industry. Paula Baderman is a single representation of a very specific reader. She's an extremely, I think I saw the term like a limousine liberal. I think that's like a term that I saw somewhere for her. And it was such a good point, because like she's a liberal in the sense like she is about, like she does have very liberal thoughts, and it does care about diversity representation, but beyond that she probably has like liberal ideas. But she's also so detached from reality, and not in a way that like Monk is. Like she is like isolated from reality, detached from reality because of her wealth, because of her privilege, because of her affluence, because of the system she was probably born into, because of like the generational wealth she might have. Like we don't know what it is, but like we get that from the line when they were like, people will be reading this on the Hamptons, and she's like, we will. And like, no, like the Hamptons are like, you know, like it is showing us that like she is a very specific reader who probably represents like the more like she's probably reading it for the trauma porn and for like the voyeurism into a life that's very unlike her. And as a publisher, she does probably care about representation, but like we have to keep in mind that she is not a stand-in for all the readers of My Pathology. Like She is very specific. She is extremely isolated from society, like not in touch with society because of her wealth, and like has just been like insulated in a way that like most people are not. So we have to keep that in mind anytime we're seeing Paula Baderman on the screen. It's just like she's not your typical reader. Arthur is in this scene. Arthur is the one who like gets Monk to be like, yeah, like you are Stag R. Lee, and like this is your true story. Like, come on. And I wonder I wonder where this conversation would have gone if Arthur hadn't said it. If Arthur was just like, yeah, no, this is, Thelonious Ellison, he's a professor in California, like it would have been so different and the deal may not have gone through. But again, Arthur understands that you have to kind of play these personas to sell books. And so I thought it was interesting that it was his idea. And it's again him trying to show Monk like, this is what you have to do if you want to be successful. I think a few other things happen from there. We get to meet Maynard. And I just think Maynard is a great character. I like the scene with Maynard because that's one of the first times where we see Monk wearing green. And I love that Maynard is like Thelonious. And he's like, it's a beautiful name. Like, why wouldn't I call you that? And again, like, it was just a very small scene of Monk just getting to be like who he is, and completely himself. And he's like, yeah, I'm a writer. I live in California. And Maynard is like, oh, you should write for NCIS. Like, you should do that. And I liked that because to me, it was like every single person has like preconceived ideas about someone else based on like just a single descriptive factor or two. And like Maynard finds out that Thelonious lives in California and is a writer. And to him, he's like, you should be a screenwriter. And it was harmless. And Thelonious Monk is just like, yeah, I should. Like, I should. That's funny. I should. And yeah, like it was a good distinction to me because it's like, we all do it. Literally, we all do it to a degree. It's just sometimes those preconceived ideas we have of someone else are harmful or hold people back or are wrong. And sometimes they're harmless. And this was just a very small example of, to me, when it was harmless. We also get to see Lorraine be a love interest, which I thought was really cute. And it's kind of, again, like, I don't feel like we get too many stories, where like the caretaker gets to have, like, again, we have this idea of like the caretaker and, in the past, the way the caretaker has been portrayed in much, much, much older films, like they're not the love interest, like they're not ever looked at sexually or romantically. And I love that we get this here because like Lorraine is so cute and they have a little interaction. I'm trying to think where we go from here. She goes on a date. Coraline comes over for dinner, gets to meet Agnes, and sadly, like this is the point where they find out Agnes's care has just gotten too hard and they can't handle it. Or really it's just too much for Lorraine. So they, decide that she needs to go go into like full-time care facility. And, when they're shopping the care facilities, that's where we get to meet, Monk gets a phone call from Carl Brunt of the Literary Awards. And in the exact same way that we need to take Paula Baderman as like a very specific subsect of person interacting with this book, we need to take Carl Brunt as a very specific person, not even interacting with this book, but just interacting with the idea of promoting diversity and representation. I don't love his character, but like his character to me was so important because he stood in for me what like a lot of the companies did around 2020, which is like they were told that they needed to have more diversity. They were told they needed to do things differently, have better representation. And so they did it, but they did it in a way that was like, okay, we did what you asked. Like you're saying you do this, I'll do it. But like they weren't actually interested in like the meaning of it, which is like, you want to promote like diversity of thought, have different perspective, influencing ideas and like affecting how things are being like run or like it they don't care about that. They don't care about like what the actual intention is. They're just like, okay, you say I need to do it, I'm gonna do it. And he calls Monk, and Monk is like, oh, he's so dry, and he's like, I'm grateful that out of all the Black authors, like, grateful you chose me. And Carl's like, you're very welcome. And completely misses the fact that Monk is like being sarcastic. And it's just like, again, we need to take Carl as like this very specific character. Like, of course, Monk, I mean, like, Monk doesn't really care about the awards because they've never acknowledged him, and he could have complicated feelings. Like, he could both want to be acknowledged and be annoyed at being a judge. But like, you know, Monk is a writer who knows his worth, who's a professor at a good school. Like, he's not like foaming at the mouth for like a single opportunity to be a judge that puts so much work on his plate. And Carl is just like, oh, you should be grateful. You should be grateful for like the single opportunity I give you. Like, of course you're grateful. I can't imagine a world in which you're not. Yeah, he's a very important character in showing us like a very, like, again, like, we just get these very specific types and different opportunities to like ask ourselves, like, are we this? Or like, have I done this? Or did I perform this way? He's another like avenue for people to perhaps identify themselves. I like that Monk is sold on being a reader because he's like, you get to literally judge instead of figuratively. And Monk's like, okay, yeah, I'm in. That sounds good. The next important scene that we get is Lorraine goes on a date with Maynard. So Monk is taking care of his mom, and he gets a call saying like this LA producer wants to meet with you. So he has to go to Arthur's office for Arthur to watch his mom. You know, I talk a lot about like the big picture screenwriting stuff, but I just want to say, like, as a small screenwriting moment, this is like very brilliant. Like, I think sometimes people, they go through, like, screenwriters, I think, go through a lot of ineffective means to create conflict. And sometimes they're too big and sometimes they're too small. And this was just like perfect. It's like, he's home. Someone needs to watch his mom. Lorraine wants to take the afternoon off. She does. He needs to be in the office. He takes his mom. And then that creates pressure on his meeting with Wiley because he's worried about his mom. Like, it's so simple. And I think screenwriters sometimes take things a little bit too big, or the conflict is like too minuscule that it's like, why can't you just, like, why is this a conflict? And this is just simple. And like, I think the screenplay should be studied for like hitting right tones and right notes. And like, it doesn't take a lot to create conflict, and it doesn't take a lot to put pressure on a scene. And like, just the fact that his mom is with Arthur and not with him, or with like, not with him or Lorraine, is enough pressure on this scene with Wiley that we feel it and we could feel the tension. Wonderful. We meet Wiley Valdespino. Wiley is wearing all blue. It's extremely important, extremely emblematic, because, you know, the things that we know about him is that he does Oscar Beatty films, and he does films that take like real life pathos and mix it with genre, and that's how we get Plantation Assassination. But like, you know, he's a character who, like, his whole business is giving people what he wants. So like the whole scene where they're in the lunchroom, like, the blue on him is just so effective because like, that's how he's made his money. Like, he's made his money from like making films that people want to see. And, you know, again, like I just like everybody who acted, but loved Adam Brody in this role. Just so good. As he was talking, I was like, I feel like I've met this person. Like, he just inhabited that persona so well that I truly was like, I have 100% met people like this. It's wild. And he tries to be relatable to Monk because he's like, yeah, I spent some time in jail too. And, you know, like, yeah, I get it. It's tough. And he like tries to connect with him in this way that's just so like not working like at all. And you know, this is an instant in which Monk is also wearing gray. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think I have an idea for gray. There's another time that gray comes up. at least one or two more times, but I don't have an idea for that. But like the things that Wiley says are so interesting because he looks at Monk and he's like, yeah, you're definitely like not cut from the same cloth, or like, you definitely don't look this way. And like, he very quickly is putting Monk in a lot of boxes. And it's interesting to me that as a director, producer, he does that, because like that is so much of what the film industry is. Like, it's like, well, like if you think with casting, like you have very specific looks, and like you're putting people, like you have to fit those looks. And like often like the descriptions of characters we see, or like the characters we see on screen, like fit certain molds. Like it's a whole industry that's built on giving people what they want. And part of that is fitting people into molds. So he is very quickly like putting Monk in different molds of like, no, you're definitely not a screenwriter type. You definitely don't do this. You're definitely not like that. So it was interesting. I also do want to talk about like how, like what Wiley represents, because he represents like, he doesn't have the generational wealth and societal insulation that Paula Baderman has, but he also is still wealthy. And I think it was kind of from being like Oscar baity that we do get an idea that like, I think they're trying to draw a point that they both have white audiences, that they are their main audience. They're both kind of catering to that, but they're also very different from each other. He's kind of more relatable. He kind of like tries to be relatable, but like he goes about it differently. He seems to be a little bit more in touch with society and connected to society in a way that Paula isn't. But they're also both cut from the same cloth in the sense that they like have this very specific audience that drives their work, that they're catering to. And I do find it interesting that they are also the two people holding the purse strings. Like, they're the one who control how much money he gets based on what they think of him. It was just very, very interesting point to make. So they're having this conversation, and Monk runs out there because he hears an ambulance and he thinks it's Agnes. And again, Wiley assumes that he's running from the cops. And Wiley is just so like quick. Like, he's so quick to put Monk in a box. He's so quick to fill in the blanks with Monk based on like the little bit that he knows of him. And it's just very interesting. And like Arthur is telling Monk, like, we got the deal, like you did it and he loved you. And Monk is like, the dumber I behave, the richer I get. And Arthur is like, now you know why my parents moved here from Puerto Rico. I thought that was a really interesting line. I actually talk about that in the follow-up discussion, which was not a follow-up because I ended up recording that one first. But I did talk about that a bit more because I was like, that's an interesting line. And I didn't know what to make of that, but it was a good line. We, from here, this scene, we get like our first call with all the literary judges, in which we get to see that they're comprised of like two white men, a white female, Centara Golden, and Monk. And this was such a wonderful dynamic to me because there are instances in which we get to see, like when you put all of them together, there were more times that Monk and Centara were aligned on their viewpoints that were separate from the other ones. And then there was times where the two white men were alone in their ideas and they were separate from like the white woman, the black woman, and the black man. And like it was a cool thing to see, like different times in which they're aligned differently, but in that setting, Monk and Centara are always aligned and like always agreeing. And it makes sense because like they have more shared experiences that are influencing their worldview. And it's also this scene that we really see Centara like advocating for taking this seriously and not like just taking it seriously, because she's like, this is an opportunity for other writers to get a chance at exposure and a publishing deal that they may not have otherwise. Well, I guess the books are published, so like that doesn't make sense. But like it's a chance for them to get recognition and to get like more sales. So we get to see her really be an advocate, and she's not just about like herself having access. Like she is really about like opening the door for other people to have the same access that she's had. So she's a very cool character in that sense. From here, Agnes gets moved into a nursing home, and when they're driving home, Lorraine asks Monk to, she says she's getting married, and he asked her to walk her down the aisle. And Lorraine's wearing green when this happens. And to me, it was such a touching scene because the two things she says is like they bring a sandwich for Agnes, and she gets really angry at the CO and not CO. I forget the term, but like she was really angry at the nurse, and she's like, she likes her sandwich this way. You need to get it right. So she's really in her element as like a caretaker and like wanting to make sure that this woman that she has been asked to take care of for years is like really taken care of the way that she would. But then we also see her in her element as a bride and like a woman who's like excited to be a bride and to have, you know, a partner and to start this new chapter of her life. And I love that she's wearing green in both because it's again like two instances in which she's really herself. And it's another example to me in which we kind of go against, I kind of mentioned it before, like we don't get to see the caretaker or the past. We have not seen the caretaker be the love interest, and we get to see it. Like she's the love interest and she gets to be like a blushing bride. And you know, there's so many times that Monk was like, we're not going to get rid of Lorraine. She's family. We're not going to get rid of her. She's family. Like she's family. And this was an instance in which it was like, you know, again, we've seen this dynamic of people thinking of the Black caretaker as family, but when push comes to shove, they're not treated that way. And this was just affirmation both ways. It was like, he's been saying she's family, but she feels like she's family enough that she wants him to walk her down the aisle. And it was just like such a sweet, a very sweet interaction. I really like that we get it. And I love that we just get this like development into this character that it didn't take a lot either. It's just taken like 3 or 4 scenes to get like such a rich development into a character that we just really probably wouldn't have gotten in any other setting. And it didn't take a lot. And it was really refreshing. And it just added more heart to the movie that, you know, just made it an enjoyable thing to watch. And it was great. I feel like I'm like rushing through this video. And it's only because there's so much that I want to unpack. And this is like, you know, I know this is a very long essay, but there's so much to say. So I'm going to keep going. The next major scene we get is the marketing call with John Bosco. So funny, like so funny, because he's like, we're going to launch this on Juneteenth. Like, are you so happy? And it's like, what the hell does this have to do with Juneteenth? It was so funny. But then this is like another situation in which, well, it's funny because they admit to like monopolizing on like the guilt that people feel, and like they are subconsciously acknowledging the absolution that people want to feel. Like, again, people don't want the truth. They just want absolution. And like, they just want to like feel like they're uplifting voices and they feel like they're doing something productive. And apparently it's going to come out on Juneteenth. And like, that's going to give them the absolution. It was like, this is the point of the movie. I don't think it's hard to watch this movie and not understand it as a commentary or as a satire or like not get it for what it is. But this is the point that it gets really driven home. Everybody was laughing at this scene. Like it was not lost on anybody at this point that this is a satire. All this to say, it was also another moment that I had on the 3rd or 4th watch when they were like, it's going to come out on Juneteenth. Like, it gives people something to read so they don't feel guilty or whatever. And I was like, that's stupid. And the 3rd watch, I was like, oh, like, yeah, like there might have been a Juneteenth in which I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I should go read a book about a Black life, or I should go read a book about Like, or I should, you know, go read like the new Jim Crow or something. Like, I should go educate myself. Like, it doesn't take a lot. Like, these characters are so over the top. They're so ridiculous, but there's kernels of truth in what they're saying. And like, I don't think of myself as anything near like Carl Brunt or Wiley Valdespino or Paula Baderman or John Bosco. Like, I am so far removed from these characters, and yet they are still saying things that I'm like, yeah, like I probably have been guilty of that. And I probably have played into that. And I like that the movie brings up so many points in which you can see yourself in. It brings up so many points of reflection. It brings up so many instances in which you're like, did I do that? I might have done that. This was another one. It's also a very interesting conversation because he's like done. Like, he's just done with this whole like farce. And he's like, I'm going to call the book Fuck. And I like, you know, they think about it and they agree. And Arthur and Monk are just like, seriously? Like, really? And they were like, yeah, we like it because it's very, and Monk says black. And he's like, you said it, not me. And I was like, this is like, this line, this is what the film is about. Like, it's okay if you say it. Like, it's okay if you affirm the thoughts and the prejudices and the preconceived ideas that I have about your culture as a Black person. It's okay if you say it and I read it because I am just reading what you're saying me. I can't say it. Like, I can't read it. I can't look at it, or I can't have these ideas. But if you're saying it, it's okay. When in reality, like, it's still just like reaffirming these negative ideas. Like, it's still problematic. Like, it's just such a like microcosm of like what the whole situation is, which is like, you know, we shouldn't be having these preconceived ideas, but like they're validating it because someone is telling it to them rather than like them just thinking it. And you see that in the title Fuck. Like, he's just like, yeah, like it fits, it's great, like we're gonna do it, and you said it, so it works. And like, it's just fitting with the image. It's fitting with like who you are as an ex-convict. It's fitting with who you are, like what this book is and what this book is about. So like, you're saying it all, so it's fine. And it questions like how we're doing representation well, you know, because he's saying all these things and they're just like paving the path. But the problem is that they're making it so easy. Like, they're making it so easy for like this book to get published under the name Fuck, for like all these things to happen. But like, what if it was a different book? Like, what if it was a book that wasn't about this? Like, what if it was a book actually about Monk's life, or even Cliff's life, or just a life? And what if the title wasn't Fuck? Like, what would that path look like? And like, we don't get to juxtapose that, but given the reactions, we can see that the ease with which this is happening is so absurd that like, we can tell that this has not been the path otherwise. And like, are they doing it well? Like, is it fair that a book like My Pathology, that is like getting this much ease and then getting the name to Fuck, and a book that's a really well-written book that has complex ideas, that is based in like, I forget what his other book was about, Persians, but like probably very deeply researched and well-written, but like that has so much like resistance. Like, is that fair? Is this actually representation? Is this fairness? Is this like giving diversity? Or is this just reaffirming what we've seen and what we want to see and what we want? I'm saying this as like a general audience, but like, is this reaffirming what people want? And yeah, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer to this because, you know, I think we're all guilty of both. You know, we're guilty of being in any part of any of this. And it's an extremely complicated question. And I'm still trying to grapple with it after like having seen this movie so many times, literally thought about this essay for months at this point. And I'm still grappling with these questions. From here, Coraline and Monk go back to the house and they find Cliff swimming in the pool. I feel like I had more to say about that scene, but it's not coming to mind, and there's so much to unpack elsewhere, so we're gonna keep going. They go and visit Agnes. And it's just like, there are two scenes that really stood out to me as like very, very beautiful scenes. And one of them was sadly Lisa's death. Like, I thought that was just very emotionally portrayed. And this scene of Monk dancing with his mom was just so beautiful. And then she says to him, you know, I always knew you weren't gay. No, I think she says, like, I always knew you weren't queer. And it just breaks Cliff. And, you know, at this point, we have really seen Cliff like blossom into who he is. And like, it's come at such a huge expense. Like, it's come at the expense of his relationship with his wife, the relationship with his kids. You know, I think we see that he like loses half his practice. So I'm assuming him and his wife work together. Like, it's come at such a huge expense, but like, he's finally gotten to this place where he's like grounded in who he is, and he's like at peace in who he is. And like, when she says that, he is just like, I am not going to like sacrifice any more of who I am to appease your expectations of who you think I should be. And he like decides to leave. And this is one of the very few instances in which we see it, like, he's leaning against the house and he's wearing a white, black, and red shirt, and like the entire backdrop of the house is just white, black, and red. And like, I think this was like one of the scenes that really clicked with like colors for me, because I was like, we're so used to these like soft blues and soft yellows. So when we see that, it's like visually very like drastic change. And yeah, it's just, you know, the red and the black are really representing like, he's pushing back, and he just needs to be who he is, and he's not going to be what you want anymore. It's a very powerful scene, and there's so much emotion in it, both in like the love between a mother and a son when they're dancing, and then this gut punch of her like not seeing Cliff for who he is after so much that he has done to just be the man that he has become. And just like, again, that scene where he's just leaning against the house, like that's a scene where you just see so much like sadness, but also resilience in him of like, I know who I am, and like, if that means I don't interact with this family, then that's what that means. Just amazing acting and beautifully done. From here, Stagger Lee does an interview with Kenya, and so important because I think we needed to draw the line that like, at this point it was kind of like white readers of this book think this, and we don't really know what a lot of Black people think, because at this point we hardly get any Black perspective on the book. But like, Kenya was important to show us like it's not divided on a racial line really. He also just says exactly what he's doing. Well, kind of. He's like, I think it's a great thing that we live in a country where a Black man can tell his life, like make a lot of money after just telling his life story. And that's not what Monk is doing, but it's what Monk is doing at the end, which is great. We also find out that the FBI are looking for Stagger Lee, and it fits so well with like the final ending of that they land on, but it doesn't take a lot. And like, again, like, I'm a screenwriter and I'll be reading something and I'm like, oh, I didn't foreshadow this enough, and I will go back and I would literally just put one line in or a few lines, and it's like enough to then foreshadow something later. And this was such a perfect point, because I think it's just one line and it's enough to make sense later. I also love this because like, Arthur is wearing a blue jacket and a red tie when he's talking to Monk, and he's telling him about the FBI, and Monk says, I wish I could just go back to not selling books. And Arthur steps onto an elevator and he's cast in shadow, and the shadow makes his suit look black and red, and he's like, I don't. And like, this is what I mean when the color is like subjective to each person in their situation. It's not subjective to something bigger, because Arthur's client is Monk. Like, if Thompson Watt bailed on the book, Arthur doesn't stick with Thompson Watt. He sticks with Monk and then ships the book somewhere else. And he's going against Monk. And that's why he gets cast in the black and red, because he's like, not seeing eye to eye with Monk. Like Monk is like just getting tired of this, and Arthur's like, nope, we're doing it. And I love it. It's great. It was a great moment to see him in blue and then to see him step into black and red. I love that scene. He then has dinner with Coraline, and he finds fuck in her bag, and he asks her, like, you read this? We don't get Coraline's response. Like, he doesn't give her a chance to respond. And I also really like that I like that Coraline reads this, because to me, she was such a stand-in for like a very typical audience. It's like she reads her genres, but she'll check out a book if people talk about it. And we don't get her perspective at all. Like, we don't know how she feels about it. And he doesn't give her a chance, but we see that her and Monk are so similar, because he's just like attacking her and like attacking her. And she's just like, where is this coming from? Like, why do you have such feelings? Like, why are you judging me? But you also see that like, she's not willing. Like, you know, we see in Agnes's, what we get from Agnes's relationship with her husband was that she gave so much to meet her husband where he was. And he was so isolated that he really couldn't like expand himself to reach out and connect with others. And in this scene, we really see that Coraline and Monk are very similar. Like, she is like, I will meet you this far. You have to meet me this far. Like, I am not going to like traverse these huge distances to cover like the separation, like to like meet you where you are. You have got to give in this relationship too. And we see that like again, she demands so much from him, and it's so funny because they're both like, they're not both so similar, because he's like, I am who I am. I have my ideas. And she's like willing to come so far, but she demands that he meets her halfway, and he doesn't. And we also get another great line in this fight where he's like, yeah, my life is a disaster, but not in the way you would think reading this book. And yeah, it's perfect. Like it's true. Like, you can think, like, there's so many ideas you can have about like a troubled Black experience. And like, he's Black and this is his experience, and there's a lot of troubles, but it's nothing like what you would think or what, you know, has been portrayed in the past. Amazing, amazing line. Lorraine moves out of the house, and Monk is handing her the yellow apron. And to be honest, it was this scene, I keep saying it, but this was another scene that made the color stand out, even on the first watch. But he was like, here, don't forget your apron. And she was like, oh no, that's just like, I hated that color. It was just something your dad picked out, and I just wore it. And yeah, it's I don't really have much else to say about that. Yeah. I don't really know what to make of that one, other than like, she's just who she is, and she's not gonna like be what's expected of her anymore, or have this like, yeah, expectations projected on her anymore. And she is who she is. And you know, it's in this moment that he gets the book and finds out that fuck is added to the literary awards, and they get on a call and they decide to take it. And that's where we get the funny thing where there's like a kind of a sexist joke that the two men tell, and like everybody else is just like, no. And again, like it was good instances, because earlier we had seen Centaura and Monk kind of aligned against the other people who were white. And then this one we were like, okay, we see everybody else kind of aligned in a way that these two kind of sexist older white men are. And yeah, I do just need to reiterate that like the characters in this movie are like not meant to be representative of all characters of these backgrounds. Like, they are speaking to very specific type of people. So always have to keep that in mind when watching this. And we get to Lorraine's wedding, and we get this beautiful scene with Cliff, in which she's got like the drugs and like his boyfriends, just hookups like in the house. And Monk is just so into like the idea of how things should be, and he's just like into the properness of it. And Lorraine comes in with her green shirt, and she's just like, it doesn't matter, like, you're family. And like, no, she hugs Cliff, and like Cliff at this point has just been like, again, like he has just felt so like nobody has accepted his identity. Everybody's like, oh, I thought you weren't queer. And his wife got angry and his children are mad at him. And like, there was a conversation where he's talking to Monk and he's like, I've taken a lover. And Monk's like Monk doesn't have an issue with him taking a lover. He had an issue with the terminology of taking a lover. But like, you kind of just really see that Cliff has been struggling. He tells them a story about how he forgot that he left keys for one hookup and then he came home and he was in bed with someone else and they punched him, and like he's just struggling. Like he's struggling in so many ways. And it was in this moment that Lorraine's just like, it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to show up in any kind of way other than exactly as you are right now. And it just means everything to Cliff, that he's just accepted exactly for who he is. And like, we just need more Lorraines in all of our lives. Like we just need that person or multiple people to just be like, it's okay. Just show up exactly as you are. I accept you as you are. You don't have to be anything more, anything less, like come as you are kind of thing. And it was so beautiful. And she does that not just like to him in his face, like she does that to the lifestyle that he has, you know. She doesn't say anything about the drugs, like neither her or Maynard care about the drugs. And then the boys in the kitchen were wearing like little like, you know, like bathing suit bottoms are just like, do you want some eggs and some smoothies? And she's like, that's perfect, let's do it. So she like lives it. Like she's not just saying I accept you, Cliff, but she's like looking at his whole lifestyle and is like, it's fine. Let's do it. Let's roll with it. And genuinely means it. And it's great. She's a very lovely character. The wedding then happens and we get to the reception in which there is like this, everybody's dancing on the porch and there is just this blue light that's cast over everybody. And Monk is just sitting on the outside, all of it. And in this scene, Monk is wearing a yellow suit and Cliff is wearing this yellow shirt that is the exact same yellow that Lisa is wearing when she dies. And it's the exact same yellow as the apron. And this is kind of like a very golden yellow. It's different from the yellow we've seen before, which was like a pale yellow. This is very golden. And I'm not quite sure what this yellow represents, but I did note that it was like the same color as Lisa and the same color as the apron. But like, they have this conversation and Cliff says like, you know, I wonder what Dad would have said, like, if he knew I was gay. And Monk was like, I think he may have known. And Cliff's like, yeah, but I'll never know. And then Monk's like, well, what if he rejected you? And Cliff's like, he would have just rejected the real me, or he would have like rejected all of me. And he would have known like who I really am and still chosen to reject it, but at least he would have seen me for me. And like, it's such a beautiful conversation that we have because like this whole time we've gotten Cliff's story kind of through Monk's eyes, in which like Cliff appears to be a shit show. Like he's, you know, done drugs and is hooking up with his lover and then swimming in the pool late at night with like beer cans in the pool and is like drunk and telling stories about getting hit by his lover and like doing drugs in the beach house and like, but this is the moment where we get to step inside Cliff's experience and realize like the ways that he's really grappled with the huge expectations that have been on him, you know, first as a son and as a brother, but even more so like as a father and as a husband, and like, and the expectations on as a lover as well. Like he's just been defying it all, but in that he's been figuring out who he is, and he's just like finds so much peace in who he is, and he finds so much assurance, and like he's not willing to compromise that for anybody else. And oh, like it's amazing that we get both his story and Monk's story, because for Monk, like what Monk is after is like success and recognition as an author. And like the things that Monk grapples with is what he's willing to give up as a creator and as an artist and as a writer in order to be accepted in order for his work to be accepted and popular in society. But for Cliff, what success looks like is just love and acceptance. And like, this is really the point where we see like the things that we want and the things that we like fight for so badly, and like the things that we like are willing to give of ourselves in order to like get and this like it's so subjective to each person. Like each person is in this journey of being like, what am I willing to do for love and acceptance, and what am I not willing to do in order to stay true to me? And for Cliff, like it was really figuring out this role, and like we can understand it. And he'll never get to know what it's like to be accepted by his father, and like, but he's accepted by Lorraine, and like that's enough for him to know that he has that love and that acceptance that he's been searching for. And like, yeah, you know, not all of us are writers. Like not all of us like know what it's like to be in Monk's situation, but a lot of us can understand what it's like to be in Cliff's situation. Like we know what it's like to feel this sadness or tension or separation we have, and we can understand this huge immense pressure we feel in ourselves to behave a certain way in a certain situation or society or within a family or within like a friend group or within like a work group, like, and it just feeling at odds at who we truly are. And it's such a universal theme, and it goes beyond like your identity as a writer. It goes beyond like your sexual identity. It goes beyond like all the things that we see in this film, but it's an idea that like a lot of us can like feel, and it's beautiful. And Cliff has really figured out how he wants to show up in the world, which is again a decision that is so subjective to him, that he's like, this is who I am. This is the balance that I have found. And he is like really striving to help Monk realize that like he has to figure out where he lies. Like he has to figure out how much he's willing to give, how much he's willing to like sacrifice, and where he lies. But he's also telling us like that's a decision for every person to make. You know, some people are willing to give more of themselves in a situation in order to be loved and accepted. Some people are not willing to give it all. Like you see that extreme in like Monk and Agnes. Like she gave so much and put up with so much to be a good wife and to be a good mother to her kids. And then you see Monk, who wasn't willing to give it all. And that's why like those dynamics fit between like her and her husband. And like, I think the movie is asking all of us also to like realize like, one, we cannot judge anybody for what they do or how they find that balance, but it is a balance that we all contend with. It's a balance that even if we find balance, we can continue to contend with it. And it's not easy, but I love that with Cliff, we can see that there is peace in his decision, and where he has landed, there is peace and there's acceptance of himself, and there's even joy. And I think that can be seen as like the end goal to look forward to when we come to that decision for each of us. And it's you know, so beautifully said. And, you know, he really urges Monk, like, you've got to just let people love you. Like, you've got to put down these walls and like let people see all of you instead of just these pieces of you, and the pieces that you think that they like, and the pieces that you think will like make you popular or bring you money or make you like successful. Like, you should just let people love all of you. And in doing that, you might just find the place where you belong, or you might just find the audience that will accept you exactly as you are. I like this scene a lot. It's lovely. After the wedding, we finally get to the meeting of the literary awards. Color is such an important part in this scene. The backdrop of the room that they're in is like blue and yellow. Monk is wearing green. I think the two male judges are wearing blue. The female judge is wearing like a white shirt with like a yellow kind of sweater thing on it. And then Santara is like in an orange dress, but she has yellow nails, a yellow kombucha drink, and like a yellow book. So very distinct coloring in this scene. And then we have the discussion between Monk and Sintara, which is like such a good discussion, because in this discussion, like the first thing we really see is like why their books are different. Monk wrote a book that is fiction that he said was real, that relied on stereotypes of characters that were already kind of really predominant at the time, or our time. Sintara did a lot of research into her film and has actually told the stories of real life people. And it is the truth. And she wanted to tell these stories because she wanted to show what people's lives are like. And she did it not for the sake of giving people trauma porn, but for the sake of being like, look, someone's life is this way because of like the situations that they've had, or like, you know, just the systems that we've had in place. Like, this is what they struggle with. And we really get the major difference between both these books. And I like that she's like, your ideas, like your problem doesn't seem to be with me. It seems to be with like the audience for these books, like the audience that you're catering to. And like, you know, it doesn't have to do with me. And like, I thought they both made great stuff, because he was right. Like, you know, putting something out there could perpetuate stereotypes. And she was like, but I'm not the one who's like talking about my life. Like, these are real stories. Like, it's the truth. I'm not talking about stereotypes. Like, that book is about stereotypes. Like, they just lobbed these points back and forth with each other. And they were so, each point was so valid. Like, it was just like, he's like, you know, there's so much potential to what, not just what a Black life could be, but like also like the way it's portrayed. And she's like, well, potential is what you say when what's there isn't good enough. And like, you know, it was a great dialogue, and they ask questions that I don't think, I mean, I personally haven't seen answers to, but I think it would be hard to land on answers to it, because they're complex questions and they're very valid questions about representation in media and like what's done well and what's not done well. And we don't get an answer because the judge walks in and is like sitting with them. So we don't get resolution on this. Rightfully so, because like, again, the movie is not about telling us like, think this way, feel this way. Like, the movie, I don't think wanted us to land on like, Monk's book is better, Sintara's book is dumb, or both books are dumb, or Sintara's book is better. And, you know, like, I don't think we're meant to really land on a question, but we're meant to be like, what, not even what are these books being, like, what are the effect these books have, but more like as consumers of these kinds of things, like what are our thoughts? Like, what are we experiencing? Like, what are we doing as we're reflecting on it? And we're not meant to get an answer, really. Monk is wearing green in this, and I thought it was just so important because he's saying the thing that he's been wanting to say since like the first 10 minutes of the film, and he's finally saying it, and he's finally getting a chance to like confront Sintara about this, which he's been wanting to do all film. And then we also get this like super valid point of Sintara just being like justifying it. Like, I thought she justified it very well. And she's like, I don't have to write about my life, like, but I wanted to write about a life. You know, I wanted to show this. And her saying like, I don't have to write about my life. I think that gave Monk the thought, like, what if I wrote about my life? Like, what would that look like? Like, what would that be if I wrote about my life? So he goes into the hallway to set up a call with Viley Valdispino. And, you know, as he's walking down the stairs, we see this picture of a young boy being like given a choice between a black baby doll and a white baby doll. And he's kind of looking towards the white baby doll. And even though like both are kind of equally held out to him, he's kind of looking towards the white one. And to me, that picture really represents like, these both will always be a part of your audience. Like, you will always have a black audience, or like a non-white audience and a white audience. But it's the first time that I think he's like contending with the fact that he will always have a white audience. And like the characters that we have seen in John Bosco and Paula Baderman and Wiley Velch, they will always be those types of people who are a part of his audience. And he has to contend with that, and he has to accept that if he's going to be involved in this type of like work and this type of industry. From here, they go back into the room and Fuck is chosen as the winner. And again, I love this blocking because it's like all the white judges on one side and the black judges on one side. And they're just like, I really think we need to listen to black voices right now. And it was just it was funny because they're clearly not listening to black voices. But it was so important because it's like, are we listening to black voices? And like, I don't know if we are, like it was such a poignant moment of the film because like they're choosing Fuck as the winner, but like you have these two black authors who are sitting here saying like, I don't think this should be chosen. And we don't hear the discussion, but I'm sure they had valid points for it not to be chosen. And they're like, well, we really need to listen to black voices. And, it just made me think like, even taking this outside of just race and taking this outside of like, the context that we have seen in this film, like there's so many times where people give help without actually asking what it is that person needs or what that group needs. And like oftentimes, not often, but like there are a lot of situations in which they miss the mark, or like the person who is in the position of being helped is like, this is not really what I want. Like this is not the kind of assistance I was looking for. And this can go on an individual level. We've seen this historically in society where this has happened across the world, not even in America, but like in this very specific instance, like it's a good line to say, I think we really need to listen to black voices, and to very physically by blocking and by the choices showing that they're not listening to black voices, because we immediately are like, are we listening to black voices? Like, are we doing this correctly? And I would say in this film, I would say no, they were not. Like, I don't know, but we're always asking ourselves that, or we're not always asking ourselves, which is why we have this film that is telling us to ask ourselves if we are. I think with like black voices, but really anybody who's in the position of being like a person of color, and are we lifting up people? Are we lifting up underrepresented voices well? Are we like promoting diversity well? Are we doing these things well? Great questions asked. From here, Monk goes, and he's sitting with his mom, and she's in bed, and they're in the nursing home, and he just straight up asks her, he's like, did you know Dad was cheating? And she's like, yeah, I did, because like geniuses have a hard time connecting with other people. And as she's saying this, like she's wearing a green dress and she's under like a blue and yellow blanket. And to me, it was like both. Like she's being so honest about who she is as Agnes Ellison, but she's still fulfilling her role as a good wife and a good husband by explaining to her son, like, I knew, but this was the role that I needed to be in. And she's like, you're always so hard on yourself. And Monk's like, Monk was like, I don't feel like a genius. And she's like, but that's because you were always so hard on yourself, Cliffy. Up until this point, like there's so many times that like Lisa and Cliff were always like, Monk, you were the odd one out. Like you were the one who was Dad's favorite. You were the one who was different. You were the one who were most like Dad. Like you both were isolating. You're both geniuses. And like, I love this because like, that's the way we've come to understand Monk as being the different one. But I love that to Agnes, Cliff was the one who was the odd one out. Cliff was the one who was different. Cliff was the one who had a harder time like going along with what was expected of him and sensing that he was going against the grain of who he was. And it was so hurtful earlier when she was like, I knew you weren't queer. But then in that moment, like we really get that like it's to some degree, Agnes always knew who her son was and always knew like she sees him for exactly who he is. And she loves him. And she just like, she always deep down kind of knew. And like, it's not so explicitly said, but like she does accept him for who he is and all the complications and that he is. And she also has seen the ways that he's struggled like for his whole life, not just like what he's going through since coming out. It's just a very beautiful moment and a beautiful thing said. And it just reminded me that like, again, like what Cliff goes through is like, not everyone can be in Monk's position and not everyone can even be in Cliff's position, but we get it. Like we get that feeling of like just the pressure of having to be someone in this world, to be accepted, and how stressful it can be and feeling like who you have to be and the exhaustion and, you know, finding peace in that and navigating that journey is subjective for each person and it's personal for each person, and getting to a point where you are happy with what you have, like where you land on that issue is personal. And yeah, it's a beautiful interaction and is another beautiful way of driving home this idea of the story. And every single line in this film is so intentional. Like there's no wasted lines, no wasted space. Like every single point is like so intentional. And we needed that interaction. Like we needed that interaction to really like show us like what Monk is going through, what Monk grapples with. Like we all can feel that and we can all understand that in our own ways and in our own struggles in our own lives. And, you know, we can only hope to find peace and joy and acceptance at some point in that journey. And maybe not everyone gets that resolution, but it's worth striving for. You know, it's worth finding that kind of peace in who you are. And we see Cliff get that, and it's beautiful. After this conversation, we get the awards ceremony. Fuck is announced as the winner. And in a moment of realization, Monk decides to take the stage and he goes up and he gets to the mic and cut to black. And then we see that this entire story that we have seen is a screenplay that has been told to Wiley Valdospino by Monk. I was grateful it continued, because when this cut to black, I was like, this is where they're going to end the film. And then they kept going and I was like, okay. I'm grateful they kept going, but I have so many thoughts. So that was just one story. Like we find out this is just a story. It was a little bit heartbreaking because it was such a perfect story. And as I said, like, this is the story that I wanted to get for so long. So then when you see at the end that like, this is all a story, I'm like, wait, like this wasn't Monk's life. Like this wasn't the story. Like, is this a fiction? Like, are we still not getting the story of like just a very average Black life in America, because it's a fiction that he's telling Wiley Valdospino? And then the other thing that made me sad is that like the characters just sparkle on screen, and I'm like, Leslie and Coraline and Cliff and Agnes and Lorraine, like they all just sparkle. And then when you find out all of this is like a fiction, I'm like, well, in Monk's world, like, is this really his family, or did he just make them like a really lovely, like sparkly cinematic version of themselves? Like, I don't know. There's so many like, there's no resolution. There's no resolution at all. Great way to end it though. You know, like Monk likes the ambiguity and he's like, I don't want to spoon feed a moral tale. And it's like, yeah, he's not. Like, he didn't in his book, and they're not with this film, or Cord Jefferson is not with this film. Like they're not. And then they start like brainstorming endings of the what the movie should be. And in this, like, while they're having this conversation, like a PA comes and brings a can over to Wally Valdospino, and he's like, what is this? Like, what is this? And I didn't get the point of this scene. And then later I was like, oh, we're really trying to understand that Wiley Valdespino is not representative of a lot of audiences, not representative of most audiences, not representative probably most of Hollywood. Like, he is such, like, based on the ending that he likes, like, we needed one interaction to show us, like, okay, Wiley is a super specific person, character. We're not trying to say everybody's like this. He is so specific. I think that was the purpose of this can interaction, because he like doesn't really get what condensation is, or he's like he either knows it and is a dick about it, or he doesn't know what condensation on a can is and like wipes it on the PA's shirt and then introduces him to like Monk, and weird interaction, and then asks for a flat white, you know. So he's really driving home the fact that like he's not relatable, despite his earlier conversation where he's like, yeah, I've been to jail and like I know what it's like to be in a slammer and blah blah blah. Wiley Valdespino is not relatable. We need to keep that in mind based on the ending. So they brainstorm some endings, and you know, they talk about like the ending in which it's a love story, like Monk runs out the theater and goes and makes up a Coraline. And you know, it's true, like they can't land on that because the movie wasn't really structured to be a romantic genre, and like you have specific marks you are hitting to make something a genre. Like you are hitting this mark, you're having these characters, you're having this stuff to really set up the expectation of it being a romantic film, so that when you get this thing, it's a huge payoff. I like that in this scene when they're playing it out, he goes to Coraline's house and her whole house is lit up in yellow. Like it's a beautiful golden glow inside and outside her house. It's just beautiful. And to me, that was really symbolizing that like we would love for them to have been together. Like they're giving us what we want, which is like we would have loved to see them end up together. But then he's like, no, like that she doesn't return my calls. And that's the truth of it. Like you don't always get an ending, let alone a happy one. And he doesn't have an ending at this point. Like maybe he will, but like you don't always get an ending, and you don't always get a happy one. And that's so much more true to life than like giving us the ending of them ending up together. And instead we get the real version, which is like, no, she's not really talking to me. She's not returning my calls, and maybe she will, but she hasn't yet. And it's very true to what real life is, because we don't get resolution a lot of times, or an ending, or a happy one. And then Wiley says, okay, give me something real. And Monk is like, okay. And then rewind. They're sitting in the literary awards. Monk pushes his chair back, goes to the stage. And I love this part because in the original ending, he just kind of like wrestles the award away from the judge. He like wrestles it from Carl Brunt, I think. And then he goes to the microphone. And in this version that they land on, he's like wrestling it and then he's like, beat it. And I'm like, oh, like he's playing into like a teeny bit of like a stereotype of like an aggressive black man, because he's like, beat it. Then he takes the award and then he goes to the mic. And then as he's about to say, I have something to say, they're stormed by FBI agents who point the gun at him and they're like, we have Stag R. Lee. And he's like, no, I'm not Stag R. Lee. You have it wrong. It was just like a pseudonym to publish the book. And then he's shot down and killed. I'm laughing because this reminds me of it reminds me of the conversation that he has with Coraline when they're fighting about fuck. Because he says, all of these stories are just about Black lives that, let me read it, Black folks in dire circumstances who still manage to maintain their dignity right before they die. And I love it because that's exactly what this ending is. Like he takes the stage, he gets a chance to confess and tell the truth, and then he dies. And it's just like, you've just given us the ending that like you've hated. You've been railing against stories like this, and you just gave us this ending. And Wiley Valdespino is just like, I love it. It's perfect. And like Adam Brody just acts this character so well, but Wiley loves it. And this is why we need to remember that Wiley is not a real person. We need to remember that Wiley is not a stand-in for most audiences, for most white audiences, like for most of Hollywood, because like he loves it and he thinks it's perfect. And Monk, he's like, let's get this on paper. And he goes to get a PA to get it on paper. And Monk says, fuck. And I love that he says that, because to me, it's like, he just did what he has been hating everybody for doing since like the first scene, where he hates on his coworker for publishing a book and for getting the book out quickly and caring more about appeasing audiences and appeasing a publisher than the quality of the book. He hates that, and he finally has done that. Like, he finally has hit a balance where he gave an audience what it wants, but like 95% of the story was a story he wanted to tell. He just had to give on the ending. And it's a question for each creator, and that's where he lands. And, you know, we don't get to see where it goes from here, but like, that's where he lands. He did get to tell a story he wanted to tell. He did get to tell a story about his life. He got to tell a story about what it's like to be a Black man in America. And he had to give on the ending. And it is brilliant. Like, not the ending they land on, like that's ridiculous, but like, I love that he just says fuck, and that's the ending. He leaves and he hops in the car, and Cliff, you know, I think Monk is wearing black. Cliff is wearing black and red. He's in a beautiful red convertible, and he hops in, and he tells Cliff, like, you know, I think they're going to get Tyler Perry to play you, which to me was like the only line of consolation that I have to be like, okay, what we saw is Monk's life. Like, it wasn't fake, it was real, because it's a reference to an earlier joke. And he looks over, and there's an actor who's there for like the set of Plantation Assassination, and they just kind of give each other a nod. And, you know, the actor is dressed as like a slave, and he has got like earphones and is just listening to music, and they just nod at each other. And I thought that was such an important nod, because it goes back to the point that like we all have to kind of land on where we want to land on, which is like, how much do we give? How much do we like stay true to our own morals? How much do we give on that? And that's each person's decision to make. And it's not for anybody to judge how it's done, why it's done, for how much money someone will do it, because each person's individual circumstances are so different that you cannot judge. Like, you get to make that decision for yourself, and nobody should have a say or needs to have a say in that. They give each other a nod, and then Cliff and Monk drive off the set, which is a pale yellow and blue set, into the green of the LA sunset. And we are finally done the film. It was an amazing film. It was so beautifully done. Everything, I have not watched all of the Oscar contenders, but I would have like given them this in a lot of the categories. Definitely for the actors. It was really great, really amazing. And, you know, I don't even know the last time I've watched a film this many times, but usually I get very bored on rewatches, or I don't have as much to unpack about the film. And like I said, I've watched this so many times, and each time I had new realizations or new things to unpack and new things to think about. And I was entertained and felt the emotional impact of the scenes each time. I absolutely love this film. And that brings us to the end of our film. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the film as much as I did. And as I said, like, there's so many different ways to interpret this film, to interpret like what happens in it. I had a conversation with other people, and each person had like a totally different take. So this is totally my take, my subjective view on this. But I'd love to hear any other thoughts, any other viewpoints, things I missed, things that came up for other people. If you understand the Johnny Walker analogy better than I do, please tell me. But thank you so much for tuning into this show, and we'll see you next time.